Al pasuk vayikra Yaakov al banav vayomer hey asva vagidol chemes asher yikra eschem b'kachas hayomim. So what does it mean? Rashi wants to know, what does it mean that he told him asher yikra eschem b'kachas hayom? What was he talking about that will happen? Amru Chazal bikish Yaakov legalos lebanav kates hayomin. He wanted to reveal the end of days. In Daniel, since it's an Aramaic, Yomim is written Yomin. It means the end of days. In other words, Achris Hayom, Mashiach comes. But, the Rashi says, or the Chazal say, V'nistalka memenu shchina. And therefore, Yaakov in the end did not talk about when the end of days is going to be, when Mashiach is coming. V'tamur. The vader that's on Yaakov legal saketz, hayaloike de laharis sheyadeh who was saketz from blitzoyrach. Yaakov Avinu was not a show-off. He wasn't trying to show, I know something that you don't know. El kedei lahavi aideza toyeles leshvatim alibnei Yisrael aboy machareim v'dorish bir. Eiza toyeles haysabal Yisrael lu hayemegala ketz b'fneihem b'oiseshah. In the end, Hashem stopped him. But what benefit would the Yidden have had by knowing about the kids? Then the Rebbe is going to add even more. By knowing that Mashiach is going to take so many thousands of years, it would not just be no tayelis, it would be the opposite. It would be discouraging. It would be something that would depress them. V'adra be'iloy Yaakov megal lamaketz asher zmani hu rak lachre kam alfi shonim kvi sheroim manu atash adayin loy bo loy zu bavad shaydeza loy hoyse ba tayelis ela adraba hadavar hayagorim b'nei Yisrael shivern and leiv atzumun and michas ruach. So therefore, what was Yaakov Avinu thinking before Hashem stopped him from doing it? We understand why Hashem stopped him, but Yaakov Avinu was a tzaddik. He wasn't just doing it, like we said, to show off. What was Yaakov Avinu's mind thought? What was his mahalach hamachshava? What was his intention by wanting to reveal that? Yaakov bikish legalos ketzeh rak lebonov. This wasn't meant to be a public thing. This wasn't going to be recorded, let's say, in Chumash. This was a private thing that Yaakov was going to communicate to his children. And therefore, shetzadikim hayu, ubatuach bahem, she'af al pi shu haketz loyrech yamim, lo yashuvu me'achrei Hashem. He knew who they were. So he wasn't worried that when they're going to hear that Mashiach is going to come only thousands of years later, they're going to say, this is too much, we can't handle it, forget it. We're not interested. He knew that they were tzaddikim, so he was willing to reveal it to them. Not to everybody else, but to them.
There was only 12 sons.
No. The point was, it wasn't to be recorded in Chumash like everything else was. It was only for them. And even that, Allah sha'af bazel lechafetz HaKadosh Baruch Hu, kedei shelo yivoda leboim achareim, v'rabim yisyayishu ilu yadu shu leitim rechoikis. Since, after all, their 12 kids or 10 kids and 11 kids, etc., whatever it was, however you make the calculation, all the kids of Yaakov, 12 kids, let's say, 12 Shvatim. You reveal something to 12 people, it's going to become known. So Hashem said, I don't want to risk it, I don't want to deal with this, and he made sure that Yaakov should not reveal when Mashiach is going to come. So the Rebbe says that this answer that Mefarshim say is still not that good of a teretz. Amnam teretz zeh ein misyashiv kol kach umekanim upon Aleph hachshash yevoda leboim achareim im yigal Yaakov zaketz l'chol yud beis bonav hu inyan hamuvim bepashtus lagamri. It's obvious. You tell something to 12 people, even if they're big tzaddikim, even if they're your sons, it makes sense that it will become revealed. Why did Yaakov think that he could reveal it? We say Hashem didn't warn him. Hashem stopped him because it's going to become revealed. Yaakov himself should have known that if he reveals it to his sons, it's going to become revealed further on, and if it becomes revealed further on, so then others are going to hear about it, and they're going to become depressed, and they're going to become upset that it's taking thousands of years till the Geulah comes. Be'ez, a second problem with this explanation, v'ikir, and this is the main problem, b'teret zeh adayin eini yishuv l'ikir hashayla. Eze toiva v'ti'elas hayayachol gilui haketz la'atzmiach lebanav asher machmasa bikish Yaakov l'galas lebanav es ketzi amin. In other words, the first question we wanted to know is, what benefit? Yaakov Avinu would not do something if it has no benefit. What benefit is there? Let's say if it wouldn't get known, and you wouldn't have to be concerned that people will get upset and they'd get depressed. But why would he tell his children this? For what purpose? Who was not able to know about the end of days? Aleph, Haketz Nis'alem Gam Yaakov. There's an opinion, not that Yaakov knew the information and he couldn't reveal it to his children, but rather it was concealed also from Yaakov. Kid Isa Medrash, Ba Legalis Lahamas Haketz V'Niskasa Mimenu. From Yaakov it was concealed. Valderech ze Isa Medrash B'Reisha Parsha Bikish Chulu V'Nistam Mimenu. From him, from Yaakov Avinu. That's one opinion. So Yaakov Avinu was taken away the capability. He thought he'd be able to reveal it with Nevuah, and then all of a sudden it was closed off. He didn't even know this information anymore. Beis, another opinion is, Yaakov loy niskasa haketz. Like we're soon going to say, because since he saw that the Shekhinah left him, he understood that the Shekhinah leaving him was like a message. It was an indicator. Don't go ahead and reveal this. And that's why he didn't reveal it. So he says in the brackets, it says the Shekhinah left him. The Gemara could have just said, that it left him, meaning haketz, the information left him. That's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, Nistalak menu hashchina. Ki ledas ha-Gemara ochem lo niskasa haketz miyankov. V'rak shenistalak menu hashchina. Ubekach noichach lo das she'ein chafetzim min hashamayim begilui haketz v'lechach legilo. So Yaakov Avinu kept on knowing when the Ketz would come, but the Shekhinah leaving him, that was the way he knew he's got to zip it. That's why he knew that you can't reveal it. Then the Rebbe brings an interesting idea in the word Shekhinah. Shekhinah, we know, is related to the word V'shachanti b'soicham. Shachanti means the level that it comes down. If the Shekhinah leaves from him, that means it's not about to come down. It's not something to be revealed. V'oid yesh loymar Shekhinah u'meloshoin v'shachanti b'soicham. Dahainu ha'koyach v'hayechoyles lahashkin u'lahamshich gilui haketz lamata labanav. It was taken away from him this power to communicate this information. The Shekhinah left him. In other words, that idea about bringing down information, bringing down a lakus, was removed from him, even though he knew the information in his mind. It's like, just to give you an example, it's not the identical thing. A person could know an idea in their mind, but it's very deep and it's very high, and they don't have the skills and the language to be able to communicate it to someone that's maybe not on their level. It could be a very big genius, but if you want them to go into a class of 10-year-olds and to explain them a piece of Gemara, they're not going to be able to do it. In a similar vein, it's not exact type of thing, Yaakov Avinu's capability of explaining or bringing down and revealing about the end of times when Mashiach was going to come, that capability was taken away from him. So he still had the information, but he couldn't communicate it. So that's the two opinions. One opinion holds that he did not have the information. That information was not made available to him. Another opinion is that even though he knew when the Ketz was going to be, he knew when Mashiach was going to come, but the capability to communicate it was taken away from him, or he was just informed, or he knew that he wasn't supposed to communicate it further. So the Rebbe asked, "V'tzarich lahavin kivin shekemuvin l'chol hadays. Haya b'yichol sakadosh baruch hu l'mnoyas Yaakov melegal saketz lebanav af bim haya yedei saketz. My time meleder r'shoyna nasa shinui v'aketz nista miYaakov." Hashem could have stopped Yaakov from revealing it. What was the reason for Hashem going the extra step and concealing it, according to the first opinion, that Yaakov Avinu himself should not have this information? Oizgin. And now move on. Sheshnei ha'ifan. Gilui haketz uminias giluyov bekoicham la'atzmiach te'eles liYisrael ba'avidosam haruchnis. This is going to be the underlying theme of the entire Sikha. Both what Yaakov Avinu wanted and what Hashem decided, not like Yaakov, both of them was meant to be beneficial for the Jewish people. Both Yaakov's desire to tell the Jews when Mashiach is going to come, and Hashem stopping him from telling the Yidden when Mashiach is going to come, both those things had benefits. That the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, they are like a vehicle for Hashem. They had no other desire, only to do what Hashem wants. Ad l'rega sh'nistalka mimenu shechina, haya behesem l'rotzna elyon asher gam ba'isasha haya Yaakov merkava elav. But when Yaakov Avinu wanted to reveal the Ketz, it was not going against Hashem's will. He couldn't go against Hashem's will. His entire being, his entire existence was only to channel Hashem's will. So up until the moment that Hashem stopped him from revealing the Ketz, he was doing things in concert with Hashem's will. So if it's in concert with Hashem's will, so why did Hashem stop him? That Hashem saw that what would be the beneficial thing at that time, what is the important thing at that time, what's the most beneficial thing at that time, not to allow the end of days to become revealed. And in this itself, how Hashem prevented it, El Shebezeh Yeshn Shtei Deyes, top of 230, L'deya Rishayna Haisat E'elazu Tzricha Liyos, Gam B'Yaakov Atzman, Ulefichach Niskase, Gam Imenu HaKetz. Uledeya Ashniya, Zeu Inyan Negea Rak L'Shvotim, V'lechein Loi Niskase HaKetz M'Yaakov Atzman. Again, we just set up the ideas over here, but we didn't explain any of this whatsoever. We didn't explain what benefit Yaakov saw in it. We didn't explain what Hashem thought would not be beneficial, and we also did not explain about yet why there are two views that Yaakov Avinu couldn't know it anymore, or Yaakov could know it and the Shvatim couldn't know it. So to be able to explain all of this, he's going to go into his dal as follows. Al pi droshes as Allah posik to be emoy visita emoy bahar nachloscha mechain l'shiftcha pa'alta Hashem. We say this in Oz Yashir. In Oz Yashir, we're talking about Hashem taking the Yidden out of Mitzrayim, bringing them to a state of where they're transitioning and going from Mitzrayim and getting ready to go into Eretz Yisrael. So it says that the way they were going to go in was in such a type of way that they would make a place for Hashem, that Hashem would remain over there. They would be planted over there. Was a place that Hashem resides over there. She'ilu zachu azai kvar ba'isashah ba'isisias Mitzrayim haya HaKadosh Baruch Hu mevies b'nei Yisrael al mochoin l'shivtacha pa'alta Hashem. When it says in the pasuk that it's a mochoin l'shivtacha pa'alta Hashem, mochoin l'shivtacha pa'alta Hashem means that it's something that is Hashem made it. When Hashem makes the Beis Hamikdash, this is something that will remain. It's not something that's temporary. It says that the first and second Beis Hamikdash were considered, were not just considered, but they were actually temporary. They were destroyed. Why? Because they were man-made. The first Beis Hamikdash was made by Shlomo HaMelech. The second Beis Hamikdash was made by Ezra and his and Nehemiah and so on. And therefore, since it was man-made, it was possible to be destroyed. Only something that Hashem Himself makes, that is not possible to be destroyed. So it says, "Machen l'shivtacha pa'alta Hashem." It's a pu'ula of Hashem would have been in Eretz Yisrael when the Yidden came in there. Since it's a building of Hashem, in other words, when we see what it says in Az Yashir, we realize that the purpose and the way how it was supposed to be ideally was that when the Yidden left Mitzrayim, they would have gone in directly into Eretz Yisrael. Hashem would have built the Beis Hamikdash. There would have been no destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. It would have been Mashiach's times right then and there. Right after Yetzias Mitzrayim would have been Mashiach's times. V'nimtza shezman haketz hamiyud be'eis hahi ilu zachu hayazman Yetzias Mitzrayim. What was the time that was supposed to be the ketz? When we're talking about Yaakov wanted to reveal the end, Yaakov wanted to reveal when Mashiach is coming, what he wanted to reveal was that ideal. He wanted to reveal that when would the ketz be, when would Mashiach come? When the Yidden came out of Mitzrayim. When the Yidden came out of Mitzrayim, they would have gone on directly into Eretz Yisrael. Hashem Himself would have built the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore wouldn't have been destroyed. That would have been already Mashiach's times. Valpizi yesh lefarish some maimer bikish Yaakov legalis ketz hayamin. Shebikish legalis es ketz hamiyud be'eis hahi zman yitzias Mitzrayim. Yaakov wanted to reveal the end of Golus as it was from the perspective of that time. The perspective of that time was that the end of Golus was going to be when we leave Mitzrayim, that's it. That's the final Golus. It's the first and last Golus. Nothing else after that. Why would Yaakov Avinu have to even reveal it? There was already an established time. It was already a known time because Hashem told Avraham in the Bris Bein Absadim that they're going to be 400 years in exile. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Avraham kiger yezarach be'eretz lo Elohem goymer abal meis shana v'achrechein yetzu goymer v'im kein mahoil Yaakov legalis. What if you're telling me that when Bikish Yaakov legalis saketz, the intention was to reveal the early version of Mashiach's coming after Yetzias Mitzrayim? Yetzias Mitzrayim was maximum supposed to be only a 400-year Golus. Everybody knew that. It was well known. If it was well known, why would Yaakov need to even tell his kids, come here, I'm going to tell you something new. I'm going to tell you something you don't know. You know when Mashiach is going to come? After Mitzrayim. It was known that was going to happen after Mitzrayim, where we're going to go into Eretz Yisrael.
You got it earlier.
Very good. Yeshloimar shebnei Yisrael yadum asher la'achrei arba meis shana yetzim Mitzrayim avol the what you said is a little bit later. All they knew is that they could leave Mitzrayim after 400 years. That was cut down to 210 years. But that's what they knew. Would this be the final thing? Would this be Mashiach's times? They didn't know that. That was what Yaakov Avinu wanted to reveal. That, you know what? This thing that you know about, that we already know from the times of Avraham, that after 400 years, the Yidden would go free, that is the final case with Mashiach. Now we can understand the question that we asked initially at the beginning of the Sikha. What benefit is there by Yaakov wanting to reveal the end? And then we asked, it's not only that, it's not a benefit, it can make them depressed if they hear that's going to take thousands of years. So now we're going to understand what the benefit was. שקייץ הימין קרב ובייסר, אזי ישתדלו להחזיק במצב של זכו, ולהישמר בזהירוס יסיירה לבל יהי עניין של שמא יגרם החטא, אשר יגרם לעיכב הקץ חס ושלום. If a person knows, and if Klal Yisrael knows, that if just going to hold on a little bit longer, they will be able to bring the end to Geulah in general. And they will be able to come to Mashiach's times totally. That will be a great encouragement. If they don't know, yeah, we went to Mitzrayim, but just like we went to Mitzrayim, maybe we'll go to other goals. They don't know what's going to happen later. So it's not going to inspire them to go that extra mile, to go that extra push, to go ahead and make sure that they do whatever they have to do to be zoich. But if they're told, you know what? This is the time that you can go out of Geulah for good. This is the time after Mitzrayim that Mashiach can come and no more Geulah anymore. But you got to hold on. You got to make sure to do what's right. So that would encourage them. Just like, let's say a person could be fighting in a war. They're fighting a war, and things seem like they're dragging on, and they don't know when it's going to be over, and they don't know what's going to happen, and they're getting tired, and they're getting exhausted, and they're not willing to do any more of the push that they did at the beginning of the war. But if their commanders tell them, if you just conquer this next hill, that's the capital city, then the enemy will fall. Just push it through over here. So even as hard as it may be, that's going to give them the strength and the encouragement to go through with it. The same thing Yaakov Avinu wanted to encourage Klal Yisrael and tell them, this could be it. This is the final time. Make sure, don't do anything to mess it up. So the Rebbe goes on and says, Amnam bir adayin eine maspik. Beisis talchus Yaakov Avinu adayin noiser meshach zman hakarav l'masayim shonad yitzias Mitzrayim. We know altogether from when Yaakov went into Mitzrayim until they left was 210 years. Part of the years that Yaakov was in Mitzrayim was 17 years. So you subtract 200 from 210, you subtract 17. So it's almost another 200 years left from when Yaakov was on his deathbed that he wanted to reveal the date of Mashiach's coming, that would be immediately after Yetzias Mitzrayim, would take another 200 years. In the end, this type of revelation of the end that would tell them, you know what? Hold on. In almost 200 years it's going to be. You know, let's think about us. If we would hear that in almost 200 years this would take place, so we would also it wouldn't be very inspiring to us because we're not going to be around to see it. By nature, what's the lifespan that a person was told about in the Torah was 120 years. so therefore it wouldn't have come out these days anyway. It wouldn't have come out when they're alive. V'hadra kushila duchta. The question returns to the original state that seemingly by telling them about this end, instead of encouraging them, it would make them depressed. Yes, you had a question.
I have two questions. First one is, so Mashiach was going to come right after Mitzrayim or right after Matan Torah? Because I thought Matan Torah was supposed to be Mashiach, but then the Chet happened. So was it going to be Matan Torah or Yitzias Mitzrayim, which was going to be Mashiach?
It seems to be, from what the Rebbe is saying, Yitzias Mitzrayim would have been, if the Yidden would have done what they had to do, which means also including not succumbing to the Chet HaEgel. So they would have gone, Yitzias Mitzrayim, directly to Matan Torah without delay, and from Matan Torah directly to Eretz Yisrael without delay. There wouldn't have been all the problems that put delays, and therefore the Hashem didn't build the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore there could be Geulah after Geulah after that.
Right. My second question is, so the thing, you're saying that it would have been discouraging to tell them that it's not going to be for another
200 or so years.
But that they already knew that was the minimum. They knew already that they were going to be in Mitzrayim until then. So, but by telling them that, the only new information they'll gain, because they already know how long they'll be in Mitzrayim, the only new information they gain, like you said, is that the end of Mitzrayim will be the final change. So that will only be encouraging, not discouraging.
That's a good question.
Any kind of discouragement that would come from telling them that they have to wait another 200 years wouldn't happen because they already know that.
That's a good question. I need to think on that. Unless somebody else has an answer to that.
He says
They didn't know the
because
210
they
anyways,
know when the case is, so they wouldn't push themselves to get to the redemption.
But if anyway they knew, it's not that Yaakov Avinu was telling them something new that they would be in Geulah for another 200 years. What Yaakov would have told them is that after this 200-year period, it's over, it's done, it's finished. So all that Yaakov is telling them is something positive, not anything more discouraging than they were before. So if it's anything, it would have encouraged them instead of discouraged them.
No, it might be like as in, all our rabbis were always telling us Mashiach, we should bring Mashiach, but we know it's going to come by the year 6000, right? So it could be the same idea. It was we knew for sure we were going to be redeemed by 400, but we can be redeemed earlier if we do mitzvahs. Yeah?
Oh, so that point,
told them a number.
so that point is what the Rebbe is going to say now, about coming even earlier than that. But as far, it still doesn't answer his question about that the Rebbe is saying that this would still be discouraging. It wouldn't have been discouraging. But your point, the Rebbe is going to say right now. In other words, assuming that telling them it would take another 200 years would be discouraging, so the Rebbe says it still wouldn't have been discouraging because of the following. If they know that their zechusim, their work, their struggles will help this be the final ketz, azay yasifu em bekiyum zachu b'avodas Hashem shalahem v'yisafezu tagdim es hageulah shetavoy oid beterem haketz shenikva v'al derech maimer chazal zachu achishenu. We know the Chazal say that if Yidden are meritorious, then Mashiach is going to come earlier than the projected time. So just like we know nowadays that Mashiach could have come earlier times based on our tzchusim, the same thing when the Yidden were in Mitzrayim, even though it was projected to be another almost 200 years from Yaakov Avinu's passing, but that's not if they put in extra effort. If they put in extra effort, it could have come even earlier. Why did Mitzrayim, why were the Yidden actually there only 210 years? Avraham Avinu was told 400 years. How did he end up being there 210 years? True, Rashi makes a whole calculation that you start calculating backwards, but that's not the pashta thing. If Hashem says 400 years, you would think it literally means 400 years from when they went into Mitzrayim. How did it get turned around from 400 to 210 years? So the reason for that was the Mefarshim say that because of how terribly difficult the enslavement was, all that Avraham Avinu was told was Vavodum v'inu oisam, that they will enslave him and that they will make them suffer. But it didn't have to be as terrible of an enslavement and as suffering as Mitzrayim did. So what happened was that by the terrible enslavement that happened in Mitzrayim, it was like condensed. 400 years of enslavement and suffering actually was condensed into 210 years of enslavement and suffering. So the Rebbe says, if suffering can cause the Geulah to become condensed, so how much more can Zchusim do? Vim kein muvan, shekeshem shaisafa b'shibud kushi hashibud ikdim asageulam al derech zel b'mekolshkein hayadavar nigram ayidai safa b'inyan zachu b'toiva. If the Yidden would have done more in adding in mitzvahs, in doing good, for sure they could have cut down the Geulah to even less than 210 years. So instead of thinking that they would become depressed by hearing that the Geulah is going to take till Mashiach comes, almost 200 years, no, they would realize that just like doing what's right is going to ensure that Mashiach is going to come, that's going to be the end to all the Geulah, the same thing, doing what's right, will even speed it up, that even they maybe will merit and be zoiche to have Mashiach come in their days, and Yitzias Mitzrayim will be not after 210 years, but after 50 years, after 60 years, after 20 years, whatever it is. That was the first half of the problem. What was Yaakov thinking with wanting to reveal the end? Now we have the second question. The second question is, if there is a benefit in revealing the end, and we just now said there is, because it would have encouraged them, why did Hashem stop him? And there was two ways how he stopped him, and we want to understand both of those ways. Either that he didn't know the end anymore, or that he knew it, but he couldn't communicate it. He was informed by Hashem not to communicate it. Vav. Omnam, afal pikein, nistalka men shchina, nimna mi Yaakov legal saketz. Vabir bezem, hashleimus ba'avodas ha'adam, sha'idei ze mis'ala l'matzav shel zachu hi, kasher avidasa hi bebchinas melachtecha asher tasa. Hashem wants us to do the work. When we do the work, not when it's imposed upon us from the outside, or even encouraged with us on us from the outside, or we're bribed to do it from the outside, that's not truly us. That's not real. When we on our own do it, not because we're promised that something good will happen, not because we're encouraged in some way, or not because we're coerced in some way, then when we're doing it, that is the most real way, and that's the way Hashem wants our avodah to be. Person wants one measure of something that he himself worked for, rather than getting 9 times as much from someone else. He needs help from above. Whatever he does, whether it's coming from himself or whether it's coming from the outside. If Hashem wouldn't help a person, he wouldn't be able to overcome his Yetzer Hara. There are 2 ways how Hashem can assist a person in his avodah. There can be an assistance that's open and clear, and then really it's not me. Or there could be that Hashem plants within us the capability, but we are really revealing it. We are really doing it, and because we are really revealing it and doing it, so then it's considered ours, and it's considered true and real. Aleph. Uledugma avodas Hashem beitis rotzen aser simei tshuva behem Hashem b'imotzei b'yosei karev ay b'Shabbos v'Yom Tov b'chlal. In general, there are auspicious times of the year, special times of the year, where a Yid is inspired. But that inspiration is not coming from inside, it's not coming from us. In the expression of Chassidus, it's called a Yisrusa D'La'ela. It's an inspiration from outside. Then there's another method. Beis asiyua va'ezer hemagormim va'mesayim la'avodas ha'odam ha'boyim la'chareim. Hashem gives us the tools. He gives us the potential. He gives us the power. But it's not that He's like moving us around and putting everything into place. He says, here, take it. Now do something with what I gave you. Avol be'eis ha'avoda gufa asiyua behelem kach ha'avoda hi bi'yigias atzmai. Al derech kama yifane baskel shemehem boim la'adam yirudei tshuva hamashpiim olav lahoisef acharkach b'toyra v'avoda. It says that there are different types of voices that come from heaven that encourage Yidden to do tshuva. But those encouragements that come from heaven is not something that necessarily the person hears and is conscious of. It's something prior to the person's doing his avodah that he's inspired by, and now he takes it on his own and does it. Because Hashem wants us to be real, Hashem wants us to do it in such a way that it's our actions, it's our service. That's the reason Shnistalka Manu Shchina. Ilu Geulah Yaakov is a case lebanov. Azai hayisafish alehem ba'avodas Hashem ba'boyde Geulah Yaketz. Amanas lavtiach sheyisifu v'yisalu b'matzav shel zachol gufa. What would have been the benefit, we said, of Yaakov Avinu telling them, you know what? This could be the final Golus. Now could be Mashiach's times right after this Golus. What was the purpose of that? To give them that extra push. That they should make sure not to mess it up. They should make sure to have this chusim that Mashiach should come after Golus Mitzrayim. So then that's something from outside. It's not coming from an internal place within them. It wouldn't have been something of theirs. The Shechina left him. Hashem did not want him to put into place so much help to assist him in this. Therefore, it will be by their own power and their own strength, and then it would have been truly real, not because of something that someone is like encouraging them or forcing them or convincing them, etc.
Like Israel now.
Koloimar,
Did doing our own.
Yaakov vayachafetz lemaher kechol hefshers yitzias banov min hagolos va'avshaz ula yechser b'shleimus ha'avoda mikol mokem aydeze took them yoser yitzias min hagolos ubefrat me'erbes ha'aretz viknisasem legula mitzvah shleima. Yaakov had one agenda. He wanted to see Yidden get out of Golus as soon as possible, and as final as possible, that it should be with Mashiach's times. And that's why Yaakov, from his perspective, said, I'm going to give them a little kvetch, I'm going to give them a little push, I'm going to give them a little convincing that's going to make them go and keep on going to the finish line and not allow that another goal should come ahead. It could have said, Rotza Yaakov Legalois, or some other type of expression. Why specifically does it use the word bikesh? Gam meloshen bakosha. Yaakov bikesh meis HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was requesting from Hashem. She'egile haketz asher haideiza yinosen siyu al Yisrael b'avidosam v'yavtiach azirus boy Geulah. That's what Yaakov was concerned about. He wanted that the Geulah should come ASAP, as soon as possible. Amnam Ritzayin Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu Haya Shal Geulah Tia Betachlis HaShleimus. What type of Geulah is B'Shleimus? When it's coming from us. Davar Hatoli B'Shleimus HaAvodah Shel Yisrael. V'lachein nistalka menu shchina. V'aydeze nitna efsharis l'shleimus gedoyle yoyser ba'avoida kanal. The Yidden would have reached, and the Yidden are able to reach to a much higher level of service. Now the Rebbe goes on in a deeper level. Zay, v'yesh l'vayr b'zeh ba'oimik yoyser, inyan anal. Sheshleimus ha'gula ba'aydeze sh'avoyis Yisrael hi b'matzav shel siluk ha'shchina, u'memela b'yegiyas atzmam, Kanal, eine rak machmas, shaychus dodius ben oifen avoide ze el agula, el zeo lefi shebavoide zu dafka toli hakes shel geula kazu nitzche shein achara agolus. The Rebbe is saying over here a very important thing. When something is real to me, then it goes on. When something comes because I've been convinced, or for some other external reason from me, so then it's not everlasting. For the Geulah to be everlasting, it needs to come from the bottom up. It cannot come because someone encouraged me and someone pushed me and someone convinced me. It needs to come totally internal. That's what an everlasting Geulah means, unchanging. Gam avodas Yisrael amavias hageulah tzrichalias mein zeh ba'ofen shaloi shinisi leloi shinuyim. An example I gave recently in a shir. A person could decide to do exercise. They're not, the first thing they're doing in the morning is they have to have their particular regimen of exercise that they decide to do. Now, it could be the reason that they're encouraged to do so is because their doctor warned them, or because they went through some type of health scare, or because of some other type of reason. But then, when the person feels healthy enough, they're not worried anymore about the health scare anymore, they might slack off. But if someone is doing it because they are committed to having this type of healthy lifestyle, they are committed to exercising every day, whatever happens, so then, since it's coming from me, not by some other external circumstances that are pushing me to do it, so then it's a lasting thing. The same thing is by the Geulah. If it's being done because Yaakov Avinu told me that, you know what, if you keep it up going and if it's strong, you'll be able to handle, you'll be able to do it and accomplish it earlier and so on, it's still not me. And if it's still not me, it doesn't have the true idea of nitzchias. It's not everlasting because it's not really who I am.
Even the CEO way also.
Huh?
The second way that is not.
But if it's coming,
he's helping you a little bit.
but it's not helping me. It's hidden, but that's still hidden, and that's all beforehand. So since it's hidden and that's beforehand, so it's still something that I am doing, and therefore it's real and remains. ולפיכך, כאשר avodas adam nas mitzvah siyum el maila, veloy bigias atzma yazai ein nitzchias ba'avodah zu. The b'shah she'is alam asiyum el maila, whatever reason that encouragement left me, so I can chas v'sholom leave that state. Meaning, I've inspired myself. It's not some external thing that's inspiring me. In other words, what the Rebbe is saying here in short is that the microcosm is the cause and is reflected in the macrocosm. To have a big Geulah, a world of Geulah, we need to be in a state of Geulah. And to have a world that's in a state of a Geulah nitzchis, of an everlasting Geulah, we have to be internally an everlasting state of identifying with Geulah, and that happens when it's coming from within me, not from outside. Ches. So now back and forth. The Rebbe keeps on going back and forth over here. So what was Yaakov thinking? Ma hoysa svaras Yankim melchatchila b'zeh shebikish legal saketz lebonov b'shah shehadavar haya goydem l'tosefes oifen avodah she'eina siba matima l'gula amitis. It's not going to be a true redemption because it's not coming from me, it's coming from the outside. So why would Yaakov think that this is worthwhile? Why would he think that this is beneficial? Now we're going to get a little bit into Chassidus. Yedua shemadreges Yaakov hoysa atzilus. Olam ha'achdus, a place of godly unity and oneness where there's nothing besides Hashem. Shu la'achrei habirur, this is called after refining the good out of the klippos. There's no negative over there. So it's all holy and pure. Yaakov was living a life in a world of atzilus, complete purity and holiness. He was already past any type of dealing with negativity. We know that at the cusp of a person's passing, that's when they usually reach their highest levels. For sure, a person like Yaakov Avinu. So even in being in the world of Atzilus, the highest level of being in the world of Atzilus, the highest level of purity and oneness was when he was on his deathbed. He did everything that he was able to do on his own, not because of external reasons. By him, from his perspective, there was no worry, there was no concern that Yaakov Avinu would be lacking the Avodah b'koyach atzmoi, that Yaakov Avinu would be lacking the Srus Lasata. There's a very famous thing that they say. People look at things from their own experience. And often they try to fit other people's events and happenings within occurrences that happen with their lives. I'd see this, I answer people questions online, and they try to be malbish in the story of Adam and Chava, different things that they went through in their lives, and therefore they have all different types of questions about Adam and Chava that don't say anywhere in the Torah. But they have a perspective on life that they like to be malbish on those things. In a good way, Yaakov Avinu was looking at everything with the most positive eyes. So he was already at an elevated state, and he already had this avodah of kav shaloi of esrusa delasata. Mahai time of bikish Yaakov legal saketz gam lebonov besavroi shaf bonov oimdim b'madrega zu. He believed that his children were on his level as well, that they already were at the same state of reality and completion and truth that he was at, that they would be ready for a Geulah Nitzchis because they were changed internally. He said to himself, maybe one of my children are not as good as I thought they were. Based on what we just now said, it makes sense. Because they weren't on his level. And therefore, since they weren't on his level, if they were convinced to push themselves only because of what he said, so it wouldn't have had the true transformative nature of something that comes from within. We spoke about earlier that there's two opinions. Did Yaakov Avinu also not know when would be the end eventually? Or Yaakov Avinu knew, but he was prevented from revealing it. Even Yaakov Avinu did not have that knowledge. That knowledge was concealed from him. By Yaakov feeling and experiencing this lack of knowledge, he would be able to direct to his children how they should deal with Geulah, even though they don't know when the end is going to be. In other words, Hashem put Yaakov Avinu in the same boat like Klal Yisrael, so he would be able to be an inspiration, a direction for them, what they should do in when they don't know about the case. The opinion of the Gemara was that he did know, but he was just not able to reveal it. Because Yaakov himself didn't need to have that type of avodah. He was already past that, so he could handle knowing the cats, but his children could not. They were not on that level. The Rebbe says a very important point over here. The Rebbe, always, whenever the Rebbe concludes with something like this, he never wants to conclude on a negative note. You come to this part of the Sikha, say, okay, so now we got to work so much harder and it's so much more difficult, and we don't have the great advantage we would have had if Yaakov Avinu would have revealed something to us. The Rebbe's approach in everything is that the very situation that we find ourselves in, even if sometimes it seems to be painted in a negative way, it's really has in it the best way that it could be. And Yaakov Avinu's just wanting to reveal to us the case has an effect on us as if he actually revealed it. Ois tes. Mikol Mokim is Bikish Yaakov Legalis Chulu. Biyoisay Merkava L'Rotzna Elin Kanalsif Beis. We saw that Yaakov Avinu was a vehicle for the divine will, and therefore everything that he did was in concert with what Hashem wanted. Muvan she'inyan Bikish Legalis Ketzer Yamin Hoya Af Ba'Yisachah Behesem L'Rotzna Elin. Like we said, it fit in with Hashem's will. V'Yisayra Mizu. Kiven shebakashas tzadik bevadai eina chazeres reikam bari hadavar shepeula v'ishpia ba'olam hazah tacht zois v'oid ma'acher sheprat ze nichte v'nikve b'toyre b'losh noira hareizu hayra nitzris choladoiris. Just an example from a different sikha. In Parshas Vayeshev it says Bikish Yaakov Leishav b'shalva, and what happened, Hashem said, so the Rebbe said, it doesn't mean that Bikish Yaakov Leishav B'Shalva, that it wasn't fulfilled. It was fulfilled. And that was the 17 best years they lived in Mitzrayim. But it had to come through a whole story with Yosef. But if a tzaddik wants something, it happens. Yaakov Avinu wanting to reveal the end happens and accomplishes what it had to accomplish. Valderech Mashem Metzinu L'Gabe Moshe Rabbeinu Sha'afal Pisha Bakashase V'Eschanan Goymer Ebra Nova Era Goymer Lifal B'Yisrael Inyan Hariyah Balakus. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu, why did he want to cross into Eretz Yisrael? It says, I wanted to see the land. So Chassidus explains, he wanted to bring the idea that Yidden should experience Elikus, Hashem, as if they're seeing it. That would have happened if Moshe Rabbeinu would have gone into Eretz Yisrael. Then it would have also been Mashiach's times, and Yidden would have experienced godliness as if they see it. So it's brought down in Chassidus that even though Loi Nismala, it wasn't actually fulfilled, he didn't actually merit to go into Eretz Yisrael at that time. Because at that time Yidden were not worthy of having godliness revealed to them as if they're seeing it. It would only be in a way of hearing about it. The Chol Zois, Paula Bakashase, Sheyehei B'Yisrael, Inyan Hariyah, B'B'chinas Makif Al Koponim, U'B'Yechides Geulah Af B'B'chinas Pnimius. It did, since Moshe Rabbeinu had such a request, and he even asked 515 times, like it says, like the gematria of the word Vaschanon, it definitely had an impact. But the impact remained beyond our open recognition. And by certain special people, it actually permeated them. And Moshe Rabbeinu's request for Am Yisrael, seeing godliness, was actually fulfilled by certain special people. So just like this says concerning Moshe Rabbeinu then, so too by Yaakov Avinu in our parsha. Last page, Al derech ze yeshloim el gabi Yaakov. Ze shebikish legal saketz. Paul bi Yisrael sheyuchlu lagia legilu yaketz b'derech makiv. Avodas Hashem ba'ofen shel cheirus mu'mas ha'olam ha'miyetza hara. U'biyichides Geulah af b'pnimius. Yaakov Avinu's desire to reveal the end of time gave us, in a concealed way, in what's called in the terms of Chassidus makif, something that's transcendent, but it gave us the capability to be free from klippus. And by certain individuals, it even gave it to them that it becomes in a pneumistic way, in something that they feel. It's brought down the different Geulah Yisrael actually calculated different times for the end of Golus, because by them, the end of times that Yaakov Avinu wanted to reveal actually permeated them, actually came down to them. And practically for us, the Hira is, there's a lesson for every one of us. We need to have this type of desire to reveal and bring down the end of days. Al ish Yisrael lirtzais ulavakish as Gilead. We need to demand it. We need to ask. We need to want the Geulah. V'zeh gufa bakasha v'izbanis b'zeh noisen siyua v'idud rav avodas Hashem. Just wanting the Geulah, just desiring, just like the Rebbe says, to say we want Mashiach now encourages every other part of our service of Hashem. It encourages our mitzvahs, our davening, our tefillin, our tzedakah, our Shabbos. All of this is elevated through this desire of wanting to know and wanting to see the Geulah. Ukenira v'muchesh, shaydei idoli Yehudi. Asher hine zem Mashiach ba, v'anu roitzim Mashiach achshav, we want Mashiach now. Poyel adavar ziruz v'yisafa b'avodas Hashem, v'teisefa zihirus yisayre shaloi hi'ei inyan shem yigrem chulu shi'akiv chashom b'yas HaMashiach. When a Yid hears that we're screaming out at Mosai and we want Mashiach now, these are things that encourage us and say, let me be a little bit more careful. Let me do something extra. Let me push myself just over that last hill to be able to make sure Mashiach comes. All the projected end of times already passed. All we have to do is tshuva. The projected times for Mashiach to come already passed in the times of the Gemara. All that's left is rak shaita chada, 1 hour. She'iyah upniya, shah could also mean turning, like it says that Hashem turned to the mincha of Hevel. Shel tshuva, just a turn of tshuva. Hamevi l'kiyum u'miyad he'negolim, it brings about that immediately they're redeemed, miyad mamish now, ba'agol d'dan, in our times.
Amen.
Turned a lot to the last.